Hola, buenos días, compañeras y compañeros, y buenas tardes.
Hello to all of you. Good afternoon, whoever is on this side of the world, and some ideas and some technical advice before we start the meeting. We are in YouTube also, and you have the chance to follow either in Spanish directly or in English. First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for your interest and your presence here in this webinar. I suppose that most of you know very well that we are coordinating this international anti-fascist web created after the attack of 2021 to CGIL that started an enormous wake of solidarity in the world. And also, we created this network that we believe is extremely important, especially now in this political moment of the world, because now especially we think it is basic to face the problem of the extension of the far right. This is the first of many other webinars we will be organizing. This is going to be dedicated to America. Then we will talk about Europe, Africa, Asia, and we have decided to start with America because of what just happened in Argentina with Milei. And last week also we participated in an initiative of solidarity with Argentinian trade unions organized by CETA, and also because of the experience that our Brazilian colleagues have gone through with Bolsonaro and how they faced this. Also, there is the hope and also the concern, or hope probably. We're looking at the elections in the United States and in Europe. Let me introduce, first of all, the speakers in the order of intervention. During the very first hour, we're going to listen to them. And then in the second hour, we will have an open debate. First of all, we will listen to Ivan Gonzalez, who is the political coordinator of the CECA in Argentina. He's going to give you an overview of the situation in the Americas. Then Antonio Lisboa from Brazil, who is the deputy president of the CECI. Then we'll listen to Rodrigo Borras, who is the secretary of international Secretariat of Argentina, and he's going to speak about the United States. We'll hear about Catherine Feingold, who is the Director of International Affairs and Deputy President of CESI. So all you have to do is to connect yourselves with the channel or the language you want to listen and to speak. And with no further ado, I will start giving the floor to Ivan Gonzalez. We will listen to him. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Gracias.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much, Nicoletta. And she says, hey, this is a great pleasure and a matter of great pride to be speaking to all of you. My name is Ivan Gonzalez, the political coordinator of trade unions of Latin America. I am sorry because Rafael Freire had been contacted by Nicoletta, but unfortunately, and as you know, tomorrow in Guatemala, there is an international conference of solidarity with democracy and labor rights. So our secretary is there. Yesterday they were in Panama with the other secretary, but Cesar and Rafael could not make it here. And there's another person of sustainable development, and Ana Jolie Dominguez, who are on their way through from here to another international conference with CEPAL. I think this is in Santiago de Chile. So we are going to speak about our vision here. First of all, I want to thank the international web of anti-far-right trade unions. Maybe we're not as active as other colleagues because we work in it, we struggle in this far against the far right, and we're trying to rather let me remind a bit of the history of our trade union. CHCA was born in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is a region characterized by authoritarianism and a culture which is totally anti-trade union as an inheritance of dictatorships and authoritarian regimes and wars, and very recently pacified somehow in the sense of an international conflict, but it's not at all a region that lives in peace because there's an internal conflict, and a very strong and felt is the one in Colombia. There is a certain hope, but in the moment we were born, this was the reality of Latin America, and it hasn't changed very much in as much it means to the threats to democracy and trade unionism. So we have a very clear identity in defense of democracy as trade unions and social actors against anything that opposes trade unionism. And this analysis of our foundation has gone through moments in which we have ratified our position in defense of democracy. Since April 2008, few months later, there was a crisis of the international economic system, and that accelerated a lot of tendencies that were latent in the region. Although we were going through a period of progress, but there was then an immediate risk of the status quo. Our trade union called for an international conference with Pepe Mujica and President Lula and our late ex-president Victor Baez in order to see what are the risk situations. Many people told us, how come you speak about risks? If you live with Lula, you live with Cristina Kirchner, with Pepe Mujica, with Correa in Ecuador, Chavez in Venezuela. But the region in Central America, they were all progressive governments. They had a certain vision of policies, but we spoke about risks because there were tendencies that were already latent and clearly started a crisis, or rather the crisis hit the region, the economies shrank, and far right installed itself. And from then on, in 2014, with the failure, 2016, with the failure of the plebiscite in Colombia, and then the problems in Argentina, 2015, we started a movement to call the attention in La Habana 10 years after our creation, because there were so many crises that were increasing the contrasts in all our region. And those projects that had been started a democratic way, they were starting on a coalition route against other movements, especially the far right in Brazil. In Brazil, there was a process of golpe to the President Youssef, and the popular project was defeated also, and Macri won. And all the region saw processes of conservatism, authoritarianism, and of wanting to go back to violence and retribution in the whole region. So we started a call in 2015, the day of, against neoliberalism in South America, with four pillars to work with. First of all, defense of democracy in the widest sense, not just the problem of governments, but also the rights of the population and workers, and the threat of the neoliberalism agenda that was an allied of corporate interests, most of them connected with strategies of golpe, like in Honduras, like in against Zelaya, but also in the situation of Brazil and the interests that were being defended in Argentina. Also, the violence started in Colombia, in Guatemala, and countries in Central America. These corporate interests have always been related to the threats to democracy. This is why we built an agenda against all these situations. So this is what we have seen. The weakness of democracy normally has always been associated to the increase of economic and conservative projects that want to continue their dominion on the region and that react to protect their own interests in the worst way possible. Sometimes with the support of the law, there are conservative protectionist governments, or with other systems of destabilization, with all kinds of coups, including the violence like 2008 in Bolivia, always associated to extreme contradictions and the defense of capital in Latin America. And to come back to this actual date, after the pandemic, after our fourth Congress in 2021, the Congress looked at the scenario at that moment, which was not so clear, the blatant offensive of the far right in the region, but it was there. We could see it in Brazil with Bolsonaro. And also internationally, there was an avalanche of issues that connected the ultra protectionism of power and oligarchs, lobbies, protecting the interests of great corporate interests with an offensive using and abusing technology in order to impose issues and messages based in hatred. Again, trying to return the countries and trying to eliminate the possibility of moving from one country to other in Latin America, because the first thing a poor person tries to do is go to a neighboring country in order to then go to the United States. But there is a very violent issue against migration and the exacerbation of all kinds against also the movements of religious sects in order to manipulate the feelings of people, creating anguish and terror in the middle of the pandemic with horrible effects, people cornered in their houses with no expectations either of medical attention or possibilities of their future. Also, the manipulation of many issues like the ones that have put Milei at the government, at the helm in Argentina. And we were saying that in those moments, it is then that the trade unions are fundamental to protect democracy. And they have to keep their very clear identification with the interests of our class. We cannot have doubts vis-a-vis these groups that are traditionally representatives of the far right. of systems that seem or propose themselves as the saviors of the situation, but they are ruining people and concentrating everything in their own private interest. If there are any changes in Latin America, they have and the parties, left, right, or whatever, whoever tries to defend those issues, they are representing only the protectionism, and they speak against all policies that we want to defend. But they are protectionist, they are conservatism. And we, with our trade unions, of course, we have had some problems because we believe that in a general analysis, this is what we get as the result. And the tendencies in some countries is to look at things from the very local point of view, then uh, consider it at the global level. So an election in any country is not defined not only by a local agenda, but also because of their international connections. And we always say that in order to defeat the right, we prefer a government, a progressive government. Maybe we have contradictions with him, but we have the chance of a dialogue, of a conversation, not always very easy. But the certainty of a conservative government is going to be against the interests of trade unions. So we do have contradictions, of course, because there are many criticisms. It seems that the projects they don't sustain their own commitments, or there is a difficulty in dialogue among trade unions. But whatever, we cannot let go the idea that we have to fight for Latin America. And we have also been together with trade unions and their agendas in Argentina, in Brazil, of course, in Colombia, in Guatemala, with all the problems of their situations, in Ecuador also, because all the agendas that represent the Conservative Party that go against progress, they are all obviously protecting reactionary interests. And before speaking about the last part of my presentation, I wanted to say, Antonio Lisboa, Nicoletta, Cristina, all of them, we have been talking about this last week. We've been speaking about the international situation, but for CCA and speaking about international trade unionism against the right that have neo-fascist expressions now, but they have always been there in the last 10, 15 years. We need a trade unionism that can be strong against the right and fascism. We need to fight against their agendas, against their policies that are protectionists, against democracy, and against the system of international trade unionism. We have to show our solidarity among trade unionism with no differences in the sense of what solidarity in what country against which other country. No, we have to have a very clear position against the war, for the peace. And there's no difference in that. Whatever aggression, whichever aggression, all imperialisms, all wars that imply losses of lives and wealth. We don't think that trade unionism have to be divided according to policies. No, that is not the way we struggle. And our General Secretary mentioned it very clearly. We have to work with our international agenda. We have to strengthen our trade union sectors, but we have to act at national and international level. And that's why in past February, we had an international conference, because we think that from the international level, we can build agendas to protect democracy. No country can survive against far right and fascist parties, and in the case of Brazil or the United States. We will never be able to face that. If we face those situations, we are isolated as countries or as trade unions. We need a common agenda for the peace, against aggression, against practices of imperialism. And we have no doubt about where we're going to be in the elections moments. We are going to be campaigning for the people who represent our interests and the, those who are committed to democracy. Bukele, Milei, Bolsonaro, Novoa, they are not just a phenomenon. They are an expression or project of a class, a dominant class that maybe be expressed in different ways in their countries, but they are represented by people who are authoritarians. They represent the dominant classes in Argentina, in Salvador, a bit also in Brazil, in Colombia, and they are doing the best possible businesses because they defend their interests. And in this sense, we believe that an agenda like the one that this web offers against far right should be part of an international agenda, not only for trade unionism. We should have this anti-fascist agenda against crimes, very clearly against the aggressions to Palestine from Israel, because it will never be possible to speak about peace if we are not able to stand and denounce the crimes committed in Palestine. And we cannot speak of peace if we only speak about things that concern just one country. We have to condemn the occupation of Russia in Ukraine. But in the same way, we are very clear against the aggression to Palestine. We are solid. We are very, very together with the population of Palestine, as well as in America. We want to condemn the exclusion of Cuba as a country that promotes terrorism. We want no imposition in the electoral movements or instances in many countries. And we need to have a very clear position as trade unions. We do not accept any negotiation of our principles. We want to be recognized by the government, all the governments. Thank you very much, Nicoleta. Thank you all for your attention.
Gracias, Iván, por tu introducción muy interesante. Vamos ya viendo muchos puntos en comunes que
See, we have several points in common, not only in Latin America, but throughout the world. And I am sure that the trade unions have a very important role to develop wherever we can impose it. And where we can't, when we cannot do, we have at least to denounce the dangers of the far right movements that defends interests of a class. Let me give the floor now to Antonio Lisboa. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much, Nicoleta. Good day, good morning, good afternoon. I'm very glad to see you all in this meeting. It's a very important debate, discussion, in a moment in which we live in a context where humanity is going through. I think Ivan has already proposed an evaluation of the situation in our region, but also he has described a situation in which I cannot say, but that I agree completely. A couple of weeks ago, an Institute of Research in Brazil carried out a survey among people who have to who deal with the financial system, the banks, the companies, investment companies, brokers, etc. All people that have to do with this financial sector and financial speculation. Well, this survey, at the question that is what was the consideration they had about Lula, the president, only 6% approve the president. 6% are in favor of President Lula. It is obvious then that there is a 94% that do not like the measures and policies of the government of Brazil in this moment. Why do I say this? Because Ivan mentioned something that I consider extremely important, the far-right movements. And many of us thought that we had defeated the far right after the war and the defeat of fascism after the Second World War. But no, they never disappeared. They were hiding in the corners of society, of humanity. And since the past 10 years, we have seen them increasing in numbers in all the world. Now, I am more and more convinced that far right has come back to the world very strong, and because it is allied with the global financial system, the neoliberalism of the financial system. And this is the reason why I want to speak about this. The president of the acceptance, rather, of President Lula in Brazil only is of 6% of the population. So far right has grown enormously, allied with the financial global neoliberalism system. Second, so this means that policies, fiscal policies in all the world, but especially in some European countries and Latin American countries as well, it has terribly impoverished the working class. This general impoverishment of populations is the way, absolute, or rather a field totally fertile where all these lies of far right can find space and can flourish. It has happened in Brazil, in Argentina, in Portugal, and many other countries. So, dear colleagues, I'm convinced that in order to defeat far right, we must declare which are the social modes in order to defeat the far right. There are several examples in the whole world, and we see which are the initiatives by far right thinking given the situation of the very poor social economical situations. So the increase of the far right has created by lack of social policies and fiscal policies that have created or have denied the spaces of the working class. And that is why they have grown up so much. They have grown so much. There's another problem that is also a consequence of the system, a neoliberal system.
Del mundo, es la fraqueza, la fragilización.
We find the weakness of multilateral organisms. We know there is a deep crisis within the multilateral system throughout the world. I usually say that sometimes I am under the impression that the only multilateral organization that is growing is NATO, And obviously, I put it in inverted commas because it is not a multilateral organism, but the others, even the United Nations, all organizations are now weaker. And this far right, the global control on the financial system and the fragilization of the multilateral system has been very fertile ground for the far right to grow throughout the world. Here in Brazil, I don't know if you're aware of this, because I said this at the beginning of the meeting, Brazil is under attack of the big techs, Elon Musk. From Saturday, Twitter or X, as you want to call it, has launched attacks to the judicial system, to the Supreme Court, to President Lula, saying that this is a dictatorship and that he, Elon Musk, is a leader for freedoms throughout the world. And he's doing the same in other countries. In Bolivia, when Evo Morales was overthrown, Elon Musk said we can have coups, state coups, wherever we like in the world. So we are under the attacks of the far right from Elon Musk, but not only him. Andrea Ventura from Portugal is stronger now, and the social networks throughout the world are debating the dictatorship that has been imposed in Brazil by the system, by President Lula, and by the Supreme Court. So this is something that we need to assess carefully, because a Brazilian journalist said that we see the creation of a sort of fascist international organization of the far right that works tightly linked through the use of the social networks. And this has been a huge challenge for us, even when it comes to allowing our anti-fascist networks to grow, to promote their growth. And here in Brazil, our crisis began with the impeachment of the president and the imprisonment of President Lula. And we had to show the world that Lula was innocent. I heard often people saying, well, Antonio, how can you say he's innocent when justice has declared him guilty? And I said, it's not the Brazilian justice that imprisoned him. It was the judicial power, or a part of it, in Brazil, and not the Brazilian justice system. So how did this happen? Through an alliance of interests, through the Brazilian financial model, so that the progressive governments were no longer heard. And so the judicial power, the different sectors were used to imprison Lula. And in that space, Bolsonaro was able to grow, because neoliberalism, the financial system, creates an alliance so that their interests may prevail. The far right grew in Brazil through these measures and initiatives, especially through the financial system, in order to throw down the government. And that led to a situation that took us to having Dilma overthrown, and now there are more neoliberal measures. The reform of work in Brazil, you know all about that. And we then started to work to tackle the far right and neoliberalism in Brazil on two fronts. First, we tried to establish the truth on the imprisonment of Lula. And secondly, we wanted to take the whole world to enter into a debate on the strategies of the far right. And something that helped us during elections was the initiative of the digital brigades, a network of our activists that created these working groups to be able to have influence on the social networks. And this has been very important for us to win elections. But we were able to do so because Lula is free, is no longer in prison. If he hadn't been free, we wouldn't have been able to win elections. Another issue is that we have not defeated Bolsonarism. It is still strong in Brazil because he is also part of this international fascist organization of sorts that I mentioned earlier. So there's clearly a global alliance of fascism in order to acquire power throughout the world. That is why we have all these crises. Bolsonaro in Brazil, Milei in Argentina, Andrea Ventura in Portugal, the situation in France, Orban, the terrible situation in Ecuador, where the Mexican embassy was invaded as if nobody was responsible for that. So it is essential to understand that there is a global network of fascism that we need to fight. With an anti-fascist international network. In 2023, there was a coup attempted in Brazil, and the parliament and the Supreme Court building were occupied, the presidential building as well. They managed to attempt this coup funded by forces in Brazil with the participation of the armed forces, but these fascist networks were supported from outside Brazil, from foreign countries. More than 200 people are in prison because of that attempted coup of January 8, 2023. To conclude, I wanted to say something that Ivan has already mentioned. We need to strengthen the network for us to be able to have a situation that is more and more structured nationally, regionally, and throughout the world to face the issue of the far right. That is why we need to strengthen the international structures. That is essential. And secondly, we need to get ready for a struggle on the digital territory. Our governments, our people need to hold a deeper debate on how the social networks will be regulated. Alliances with neoliberalism, with the financial system, but with this possibility they have to present fake news all over the world, it is very difficult for us to tackle them, to face them, and to fight them. So we need to face the issue of the regulation of social networks, also now with the artificial intelligence. These are amongst our challenges. But first of all, we need to keep up our network and understand that facing the far right is not easy because they are very well structured internationally, and we need to create the conditions so that we may have the strength to face them and fight them also on the social networks. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Antonio, for the experience you have shared with us. This will be extremely useful. The issue of the social networks is a very important challenge, and we definitely have to face it on the national and international levels. Now there will be a small change in our agenda because Kathy has another commitment after this, so I will give her the floor immediately. I hope Rodrigo won't mind. Thank you. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, Nicoleta. I feel it is the perfect uh, transition between Bolsonaro and Trump. And there is a strong connection between both of them. I liked what Lisboa said. Even though we have Lula and Biden in our countries, that doesn't mean that there isn't Trumpism and Bolsonarism, which is still felt strongly Trumpism in the United States. And what I'm hearing is that the state of democracy is precarious. And in trade unions, we are in the front line to protect democracy, both in our workplaces as in our countries. And as everybody knows, in the United States, we're moving towards elections in November. But I feel as if they have been campaigning for a year already. The trade unions has supported Biden since very early on. It's the first time that our that we decided to publicly support Biden. This was very important because we think that he has been the president that has been most in favor of trade unions in the United States, the first to walk the line of the strikes, those who were working in the automotive sector, and we thought it was important to give him our support from very early on. We have been campaigning for a year. Our system is very different in the United States. In the last elections, I think they spent $1 billion to win the elections, and that is absurd when we think of what could be done with that kind of money. But here in the United States, like everyone throughout the world, we feel these are the most urgent and important elections we've ever had, because we not only need to campaign for Biden to win and for us to reacquire control over Congress, because right now it is not working. We can barely promote essential laws or acts. We have the far right controlling parts of the Congress here in the United States. I believe that there are still people who are shocked. We see the surveys every day that Biden and Trump are almost on an equal level, according to surveys. And we need to ask ourselves, how can this be? How is it possible that so many people are still supporting the far right, the fascist agenda that is against workers in the United States? These are questions, and I believe that it's the same thing in Brazil, and I guess Rodrigo will tell us about Argentina. So how can this be? Biden has been the president most in favor of trade unions, of working women and men. We have three important laws that have given rise to strong investments in infrastructure, semiconductors, and the transition to clean energy. So we say it is unbelievable. Biden has done so much for workers, and Trump did nothing for them in this country. So as a trade union movement, we have had to have difficult conversations. How can it be that the working classes are unable to realize what Biden has accomplished in this country? And there are many contradictions because the trade union movement now enjoys a lot of support. 88% of young people in the United States uh, hold that they support the trade unions movement. But this is not reaching the surveys that still show Biden and Trump on equal on an equal level. And we must say that the neoliberal political agenda that we've had for many years in the United States has had a huge impact. We have a history of policies that have excluded people, and they are based on race, so that people who are Black are less protected. Institutions don't give them what they need. We don't have a social protection system that works very well here in the United States. We don't have health insurance for all our workers. Our working laws do not protect immigrants, nor classes of workers such as those who work in the homes. They say that even though many positive things have been accomplished, people believe the system is not working for them. So they feel there is a lot of chaos in the system, and they see Trump's speeches that last for about a couple hours. And what he says is that there is a chaos in the world and in the United States because the people, migrants are entering the United States through the southern borders. There's no employment. If you work at a factory, well, they want to transition to sustainable energy like electricity, and the world is in a chaos. And so if the world is living a chaos, if he wins, he won't leave. He will stay as a dictator. So it is important for us to understand the roots of Trumpism in the United States. It is linked to the rise of the agenda of the far right. We did not have universal elections until 1965. Not everybody could vote until 1965. And so not everybody had the right to vote. The achievements of the civil rights movement have always found opposition to what the Black communities managed to achieve, and so on and so forth. Now we see that at Congress, people say, I am a white Christian, and I believe that white Christians should lead and dominate. So we need to consider this far right rise that is using racism, saying that the white people need to dominate and lead in the United States, and Trump is taking advantage of all this. I would like to hear what Antonio Lisboa thinks about racism and how it is seen, because here Trump takes advantage of that, saying there's too many migrants, there are communities who want more power. And so that's why people feel they need somebody like Trump. I would also say that in our country, we have a huge problem. In the 70s and 80s, the trade unions movement had a lot of power. Now the percentage of workers that are represented is almost 11%. So that's important to understand. If it's only 11% that has collective power in the United States, that means that we don't have sufficient power. We don't have enough power to face Trump's policies. We need to come up with alliances. And that is what we are trying to do in AFL-CIO to tackle Trump's policies. The Trumpism of the past is not the same as that of the present. Do you remember when he won? He was surprised because he was in Washington when he won the elections, and he himself was surprised that he had won. He arrived with a team of people that had never worked in government. They didn't know what they were doing. I guess some of you met them in meetings. They came from other towns. They had never been in Washington. They didn't know how to run a government. This time, the right has a think tank called the Heritage Institute that has a framework of 800 pages indicating how they're going to push conservative policies in the United States, beginning with women's rights, the rights of workers. It's called the 2025 framework. They are well organized. So if Trump wins, it's going to be very different this time around because now he does have a right-wing agenda and they are mobilizing people. They are trying to prepare the right wing to acquire to get power in Washington. And he's saying that if he wins, he will never leave. He's also saying publicly that he wishes to consolidate power in the United States when the government has checks and balances. So no part of the government should have too much power, excessive power. But Trump's plan is that public workers, federal public workers, will have no rights. They are now members of the trade union of AFL-CIO, but he says he's going to consolidate power under his presidency. This has never happened in the United States, and it would be a huge change. Also, Antonio Lisboa mentioned Elon Musk. He is also leading a campaign in the United States to deconstruct the administrative state in the United States. It is where workers go to have their trade union elections. And so Elon Musk says that these bodies should not be allowed. And so there is alignment with people like Trump and Elon Musk that have a vision of the state. That is, they don't want a state that works at the service of workers. So we're entering a time that is very dangerous. We're already living dangerous times in the United States, but I believe it is important to understand that people listen to Trump because they believe that the systems of democracy are not giving people what they need here in the United States. There's no social protection. There's economic inequalities that are huge in the United States, and this is also linked to the power of the trade unions movement. So we have our own challenges. What are we going to do in the next 6 months? Answering to what Lisboa just said, we have seen that they are using artificial intelligence for elections. In New Hampshire, they did they they call you up to say, "Hello, I'm President Biden, and I'd like you to support me." Well, they did this using artificial intelligence. They stole those calls. It was Biden's voice, but he wasn't making the call. So we already see the impact of the fake news, of fake information, calls from President Biden that are not actually from President Biden. So the first step we need to take as a trade union movement is to become the information vehicle for our movement, the right information vehicle. So we are making huge investments in terms of money and energy into a member-to-member education program. We're going to go home by home, knocking on doors, speaking face to face. One thing is the social networks, and something different is when I go to your home and I say, I am from a trade union. We need to have a conversation on what's going to happen if Trump wins the elections. What has Biden been able to achieve to give everybody a better life? So we will all be knocking on doors in our states that we have, as we call them, the battle states that are the most important ones, and those are the ones we're going to focus on. The second step we're going to take is to go workplace to workplace because we believe that people trust those whom they work with. because one thing is Facebook and Instagram, and something else is the person you have coffee with every day when you're working. So we're going to go to all the workplaces and we're going to hold conversations there. And we are also going to have our own agenda concerning the social networks so that people may get information from the trade union movements on the importance of the upcoming elections between Trump and Biden and the vision we wish to create. So to conclude, I would say, as others have said, that we need to have these conversations. We need to maintain these exchanges like you are holding them in Argentina, Italy, and Brazil to make our situation better in the United States. We understand what is happening in other countries because everything has an influence on everyone else. So if you call us in the next 8 months and we don't answer, it's because we'll be knocking on doors. So if you want to help us, you're welcome. We need help with the Spanish language here. We will all be focused on the elections up until November. So thank you so much for inviting me. I hope we will all continue to work to stop the rise of the far right. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for your interesting words. You have succeeded in scaring us uh, because it is actually possible for Trump to win elections and stay. And it is also important for us to reconquer the personal trade union space by knocking on doors and going beyond the social networks. Since you spoke of dismantling the state, I believe I can give the floor to Rodrigo, who is going to tell us how Milei is trying to uproot the state system in Argentina. Thank you, Nicoleta. I am grateful for this opportunity to be in this space for dialogue. From what we've heard, this affects us all. We have a lot of shared issues. I can agree with most things that I have heard today. What is at the root of all this when Ivan started speaking, how all this started, the different attacks that were launched by the far right. Antonio spoke about the influence of the social networks and Elon Musk on all of these processes. And Milei right now is in Miami and he's going to meet Elon Musk. So there are international connections that they have. And then also what Katie said, that question we should ask ourselves, why are workers voting for the far right, which is what happened here in Argentina. And now we've had Milei for 5 months, but it looks like 10 years. It's very difficult. It's very hard, everything that's going on, and it's moving so fast. And this is what happened. We had two options. Let's say progressive center field to continue the alliance that we had in the government. And on the other hand, we had an option that was the worst of the old far right of the concentrated fine economic powers in Argentina, and with a reminiscence of the military dictatorships with a new character that is this person, Javier Milei. And it was impossible to imagine that he would actually become the president of Argentina or of any given country. Yet he won the ballotage, the elections. And that is when we started asking ourselves, what had we done and what had we not failed to do for workers to vote for him?
momento, días previos
Just few days before the presidency of Milei, we had a meeting with Álvaro Alzaminera, the ex-president of Peru. He has been fronting one of the hardest coups in the region. But I understand that
procesos progresistas
all
que tuvimos,
these processes of the right in the region have left very clear that people expected much more from these governors. We seem to be very good at talking and promising, but when it comes to the gritty nitty, people need concrete results. People need to have results in their hands. They have to see them. So people like Milei promised on the basis of a lot of lies and things that had no reason at all. He offered an horizon, a silver lining, and fundamentally young people especially, because he spoke about dollarization to fight against inflation, that the political caste, as he calls the professionals, that would have paid for all the costs of those readjustments, that the workers would be in a better situation, that the schedules, the working schedules in the public services would have been improved somehow for the benefit of the labor of the workers. But who's paying now the price of all that? The whole of Argentinian society, especially the low and middle classes, who are the ones who need more the assistance of the state now. Milei now is confronted head to head with the state. He says the state must not intervene at all, at the most in representation of things, but no action. So we're speaking about things that have been dealt with during the 19th in Argentina. The fact that the public enterprises must go to privatization. This affects health services, education, practically all the services.
el Estado hoy se encuentran en crisis. Partiendo también de que en el minuto uno,
Also, because since the very first moment of his mandate, he devaluated our currency. So the average salary of a worker in Argentina is the lowest in the whole region. We have gone back in the economic sense, and all tasks has been liberalized and have been multiplied by 7 sometimes. And so all this had an effect, a shock effect. And we have to take this into consideration, because this is what we're speaking about this precisely. This is the way the right acts in all their regions. And the last government before Macri tried to impose this policy, but he found a lot of resistance by the society and by the trade unions. So he had no margin. Now the far right government of Milei is acting with a shock system, with the shock devaluation. He imposed the urgent action decrees in Argentina, was presented by him to the executive power with the amendments to 300 laws that liberate completely the economy, with a special chapter to workers, attacking trade unions. Luckily, we have struggled, and we have had some warnings. We denounced these urgent decisions. So the chapter of reform of the labor legislation has been suspended. We have organized meetings and strikes, and we have obtained the recognition by the UN of a protocol against strikes. Now we can do it. We can do it on the streets. We can walk along the streets, because otherwise we would have been punished. I belong to a trade union of the Air Force. We have been protesting and creating strikes. We have been punished by the government. 16 million pesos. It's a lot of money for a trade union. Impossible to pay it. But we are trying to fight it at the tribunal, because this is against all trade union rights. But we believe that they are taking note of what we are doing. And I would like to point out to a very important issue. I think that as a movement, we trade unionists must also take note of this. This new far right is different from the previous one. The previous one was concentrated on financial, economic questions and capitalism. This new one, this new far right, starts questioning a lot of issues that we thought had been already finalized. This is a cultural point of view, through social networks, through a violent discourse. And I think we are not prepared to fight against this. We don't know how to react as a trade union against these attacks. And I see that Cristina is in the Zoom, so she will probably explain it better. But as a trade union, we have been taking note of these new actions by the far right in the whole world, how they are registering the situation in every country. In other words, the new right adapts itself to these situations in every country. Things are different in Italy and or in Brazil, or Milei in Argentina. This far right adapts itself to the situation of each country. So we have to be very careful. We have to get involved completely as trade unions, because we are the only guarantors that the processes may and can be democratic. We are the ones who resist all this advance of the far right. Katie said just a while ago that the trade union movements have support. But I think at a certain moment she also said that if the middle class is what it is, that it was thanks to the trade union struggles. Same thing goes for the attacks by the Argentinian government against the trade unions. Milei, the government, is attacking the trade unions. They are trying to coerce their rights to strikes, their rights to manifest their intentions, and the labor law reform has been suspended, and I'm sure they're going to attack it, and also speaking against our representatives or trade unions and representatives. If they break our unity, if they can destroy our unity, we have problems with the audio, sorry. For us, and not only for Argentina, or I think for all countries, the struggle we fight against this is very strong. We have to be united. We have to be clever. Our enemy has been preparing itself, has studied, has been analyzing every step they take. So we cannot go out and completely unreined horses. We cannot go like that. We have to be united. The strikes that we have organized in Argentina never was stopped by the by the government. On the contrary, what they wanted to do was to excite, to increase the situation of discontent among the citizenship. This is why I think that Antonio is right when he says that Elon Musk has a lot of influence. Milei is meeting Elon Musk right now in Miami, and that person has no sympathy to democracy. On the contrary, they together are going to do their best to destroy democracy. They know that political parties today are under questioning and review, but the only enemy we have is the far right, and the only defense we have against far right are the trade unions. We have to study and study again some issues that are left pending. They have happened here in Argentina. The cultural battle, for example, Antonio Gramsci, a great thinker, Italian philosopher that knew how to reinvent Italy from the ashes of a defeat. And we should do the same. We should go back to the basis. We have to speak with every one of our representatives to explain each and every one to them what is the sense of our struggle. It's not a superficial issue of just money. No, we are fighting for the future of the working class, for a country, for our countries, and also for democratic systems. It is very difficult to go back to democracy when you lose it. And many of us know it. And the workers know it too. Let me also, rather, I would stop here, but I think that this moment is like the hinge of the history of humanity. It doesn't happen only in America, it happens in Europe, it happens globally, internationally. Questions are put to the democratic systems that have not been able to answer to the demands of society. We have to leave this status of resistance. We have to be active. We have to be proactive. If we stay put where we are, the enemy will be able to win faster and faster. And we must go out. We must attack. We must question them. Not only with artificial intelligence. Let's go out directly and let's say they are lying, that they are selling lies to us. It's a very hard job to carry out, but and probably it'll take years and years, but that's what they have done during years and years. Well, there is a problem with the audio. I'm sorry. We must be more active. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. All the presentations we have been listening to have been extremely interesting. And as you say, it's a cultural battle. Although the rightist movements are seeing an increase in acceptance, we have to struggle. We have to attack them. They are attacking our civil rights, our rights to strike. And these are things that happen in Italy as well, not only in Argentina. Now, let me give the floor to whoever wishes to take it. Just raise your hand. You will see an emoji with a little hand down there. You can raise that hand and I'll give you here. We have Cristina. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon. First of all, because you speak about me, I will speak. Thank you very much for this initiative, a very useful space. It's a space of, it's a think tank of our common points of view. And it has been very interesting to listen to the previous speakers that have described the situations of their countries and the risks they have to face against the far right in their governments or possible future governments, together with some ideas of the causes that have created this situation. Now, following the line of thought of Rodrigo, the trade unions are guarantors of democracy. I think we all agree that is the role we have internationally in every country. Trade unions are instruments, agents capable of denouncing violations of rights and democracy. And at the same time, that is our role, that is our function together. And that together with the obstacles we can put against the far right, ultra liberal, like the case of Milei, the continued destruction of the state of law, and the increasing of maximum benefits for capitalists, extreme capitalism. We are for them a problem. We are their enemy. But I think that in this situation, we have to move ahead. We have to act as a trade union. Very well. I would like to provoke a reaction. Okay, I agree it's necessary to act as international trade unions, but we have to know also what kind of action, what kind of solidarity can we show, can we promote in order to be as useful as possible? At the same time, how can we act at the industrial sector in relationship with their representatives, with collective bargaining and our natural spaces of work. So this initiative of anti-far right initiative, I think, is fantastic. We have explained and spoken about many of them, networks, and this network to face the far right from the working places. So again, this is what I propose. What do we do from now on? How do we work? What is the most useful action to protect the people who are already suffering the consequences of the advancement of the far right? Thank you, Cristina from Comisiones Obreras, Spain. To whoever takes the floor now, please identify yourself. Remember, you can speak either in English or Spanish, whichever you choose. No, I see no hands. Apparently, nobody wants to take part in the meeting. I will give the floor to Hernan Ruquirello. Please introduce yourself. Hello. Good morning or good afternoon. I hope that you can listen to me. Yes. Please introduce yourself and also your trade union. Thanks again for the invitation. My name is Hernan Ruquirello, International Relations of the CGT in Argentina. My trade union is the Construction Workers Union of Argentina. This is the first time I participate in this space, although I know many of you. So hello to all of you. listening to Ivan, to Cristina, Rodrigo, Antonio, I think, and Katie as well, of course, their diagnosis that seems to be common. Let me just offer some more details of this task that seems to be a global interest for all of us. Going back to what Cristina said, this is something we must do because on the one hand, the trade unions, especially in Argentina, have been left as the spear point of resistance against the government. Obviously, on the one side, this is something that we are proud of, but we also know that this struggle cannot be carried out alone. We have no support from the political parties. They are absent. We feel alone in this struggle. There are very few. The opposition leaders that protect us or that are with us are very few. But beyond that, I think there are two other issues that merit our attention. Katie and Antonio mentioned them. So there are two fields, the battlefields, the AI field and the street, the territory, because it is very important to go door to door and factory per factory, speaking personally to people, communicating strategies, but also the AI communication is very important. I think that we also have to look ahead, wondering what's going to happen with AI and how it's going to influence all our debates. So we have to be at the level of these matters. We must know what's going on with new models of development, of building, etc. I think as trade unions, we must delve into many other issues like environmental justice. For instance, transition from one system to other, migration due to climate conditions, migration per se. There are new phenomena that have to be spoken about because they have to do not only with our present moment, that they're going to have consequences in the future. We need to be there, and we have to strengthen our territorial capacities. We have been working on that. Our three trade unions are working here in Argentina a long time ago. This is not something new, but it's coming out. It's more visible now. Ivan mentioned it at the beginning. In the several issues like racism and xenophobia are coming out, and so we have to face them and try to change the situation, starting from concrete actions and projects. Rodrigo said, why have the left had so few votes? Because we have never materialized our promises, and that has created a malaise that has given reason for the governments of the right. So we have to act. We have to act at the level of our territories with new concrete projects, speaking, conversing, talking, training, speaking about economy, social issues in Argentina, sovereignty. There are so many issues that we have to speak about and that we need to clear up, as it were, for all of us. This is a double challenge, double scenarios of a possible battle. Let me thank again for this space, because here, as in many other international spaces, we have demonstrated our common solidarity. And this is very satisfactory, knowing that trade unionism in the world knows that we exist and they give us all their support. So thank you very much again. One more thing, sorry, because speaking about far rights, they are always, they attack trade unions specifically. So they want to vindicate the individualism. That's their point of struggle. But in Argentina, there is a new stage, I think. The notion of the individualism is a cruel tool. It's cruel. So I couldn't care less about you, about whatever you do. No. Now you see that the other one is suffering, but you don't care. No, you enjoy it. You enjoy it. You feel very satisfied because one of your colleagues has been evicted from his home or fired from his job. That is cruelty. I've never seen anything like this before, never as strong as this. This is a situation loaded with hatred against the other, the persons who do not think like you. So this is xenophobia, pure xenophobia. We have to work against this. That was it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hernan. I think that the answer that you have seen in Argentina with the unity shown by the trade unions is a very clear reply, and it makes you Argentinians stronger as a trade union. Now, Salvatore has the floor.
Thank you, Nicoletta. I will speak in English. Sorry, my Spanish is not good enough. I'm just going to say a couple of words on behalf of CGIL, of course, of the Italian General Confederation of Labor, which is the founder of this network. First of all, I want to thank the speakers because all of them gave a very important contribution to this debate. And I wanted to try to reframe the conversation that we are having today in the wider framework of what we are doing in terms of fighting against the far-right nationalism and the neo-fascist and neo-Nazi organizations that are popping up everywhere in the world. We are a specific network. There are other networks which work on anti-fascism and the fight against the far right. We are a trade union network. And I think this is the real added value of this network and of the work that we do and we can do in the future. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if I look at there will be another webinar. The next one actually will concentrate on Europe, but I will use a little bit the Italian case to say what I think and I wish we can do together at the European and of course at the global level. Re-strategize the trade union agenda around our defense of social and democratic rights in order to disseminate and to raise awareness, actually, to raise awareness among workers of the possible and present damage that the far-right parties are doing on our welfare systems and on the social cohesion of our societies. I think we have to be very clear in everything we do. Tomorrow, there is going to be a general strike in Italy, mainly on health and safety. 1,000 workers have died in Italy because of work-related accidents at work. The Meloni government is further liberalizing regulations in subcontracting, and 70% of the fatal accidents happen in subcontracting chains in this country. 1,000 people, workers died, I repeat it, And this is the result of the attack of the far right and extreme right to workers' rights. So my message is, let's make use of this network to better use the trade union instruments that we have at hand. And I mean, Kathy, I think, was saying before that we need to go door by door. Lisboa was saying before the digital brigades of CUT Brazil. Christina was mentioning Redes, and others were mentioning trade union instruments that we already have. We don't have to create anything new. We have maybe to be better coordinated in delivering the same messages, because most of the things that Ivan and Rodrigo mentioned for Southern American workers are exactly the same problems that we are facing in Europe, in Africa, and in Asia. So I think the network, and this is why we are putting a lot of energy in promoting the network and organizing these events, is to gather joint strategies and, of course, messages. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you again.
Gracias, Salvatore.
Thank you, Salvatore.
Thank you,
I
Salvatore. I believe
what you
that
said
what
is
he has said is
extremely
extremely important.
The deaths
The
on the
number of
workplace is
deaths that
something
we've
that
had that are
is very
work-related
painful.
is huge, and that affects us here in Italy. Now we will hear Rafael Lamas from Belgium. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. A lot has been said, and I share a lot of what has been said, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I'd like to mention 3 points. First, we need to receive information. I shall take the example of Argentina. I think it would be necessary for us to have on a weekly basis or every 2 weeks summarized information on what the Milei government is doing. How does it affect you? Because Brussels is 8 or 10,000 kilometers away from Buenos Aires. But if we wish to keep the attention of our members on the risks that somebody like Millet entails and how it is important for Belgium as well, well, we need to be able to explain concretely, not with principles or uh, but with practical examples. What is the impact on the daily life of a citizen, of a worker in a country? And if we could do this in several countries, it would be very interesting. Just a couple pages, summarized information that would allow us to keep our dialogue with our members. What is the impact of the far right on the daily lives of workers and citizens? And my second point is the fact that the best way, one of the best ways to fight against the far right is not to allow them to impose their political agenda. That is why we need to have our own agenda, and we need to try and keep attention high on what really interests our members. That is the social and financial aspects. One of the debates we've tried to maintain here in Belgium is to explain that the new regulations on budgets, financial budgets in Europe are going to have a strong impact on social policies in the next few years. It is not easy, but we're doing it because it is important. Because when political parties need to explain what do they want, what are they doing in this sense, if they want to apply these laws, that means cutting uh, public services, the purchasing power of workers, We need to discuss these issues, and we need to discuss less migration and borders and so on and so forth. My third point is that I believe it is important because we are here discussing between Europeans and people from the American continent. We share the same types of societies of struggle for democracy and so on and so forth. But it is important if in this network we also link it to other initiatives. CCI's campaign on democracy in the European Confederation of Trade Unions, we're also trying to see what is the best way to fight against the far right. If we look at it on an international level, we need to take the other realities into account as well, that of Asia and Africa, because they are not like our realities. This is not the purpose of this dialogue, but for an international network, it is important to see how we can have a shared language, a shared purpose and goal, but how will we translate that into the national and regional realities and situations? Thank you. Thank you, Rafael. As we said, we're going to hold another webinar and we're going to open up the discussion to all regions. Now we will hear Andres Larisgoitia. If you wish to take the floor, raise your hands now, because then I'm going to give the floor back to our speakers so that they may comment or answer or draw some conclusions. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It is very simple. First of all, I'd like to answer Rafael. Rather than a page every now and then, we'd have to have a daily page of information, because the measures that Milei is taking change day from one day to the next, and that affects all of the Argentinian people, not only workers. We made a video between the three main trade unions, and that was shown in Montevideo. We can ask Ivan to uh, distribute it to you as well, so that you can see what the reality is. And we can also commit to send updated weekly information of all the different measures, bills that Milei is passing. I don't want to repeat what others have said, but I do wish to make a simple reflection. The withdrawal of the state and the systematic attack to all organizations, especially trade unions, but all social organizations or people's organization, leaves an open space to something that is extremely concerning, and that is drug trafficking. We all know that when the state takes a step back and social organizations are unable to organize themselves, that gives rise to a process where drug trafficking progresses with a lot of violence, and this is very dangerous. We see this in Rosario, we see this every day. So the social organization, both neighborhood and trade unions, we see how drug trafficking organizations uh, move forward on the territory, and this is extremely dangerous. This space has a possibility of forming alliances with the most fascist sectors, and that entails a greater risk for the people's movements. We need to tackle all this. How can we become stronger? How can we link up with others to fight this? That is one of the issues we're trying to move forward with in Argentina and Latin America, to be strong as an opposition to resist the process of the far right that the Argentina and the world are experiencing, that we need to put an end to. Thank you. Thank you, Andres. We will be by your side. FNB from Holland wishes to take the floor.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Marta van der Bergen here from the International Department of the FNV Dutch Trade Union. Let me start by thanking also all the speakers for their valuable contributions. And to maybe share a bit with you from the context of the Netherlands. I mean, as you know, we had a massive gain of the far right in our last elections in November last year, where the far right has more than doubled their seats, and even after the elections, their support is still on the rise. The governmental negotiations are still going on, but it's really likely that we will have a far-right government in place very soon. So yeah, as a trade union, this forces us also to reflect on our strategies, obviously, like our political lobby strategies, how to organize on the work floor, what maybe to do in terms of our educational programs, our international solidarity relations, maybe also. I mean, so I want to really second what Salvatore said earlier on, that I see great value in this international network from this point of view, that we can learn from each other and strengthen each other in terms of union strategies under the far right on all these different levels that I just mentioned. And I also want to share with you that with FNV each year we organize an international solidarity festival for our membership. Not members are welcome. Last year we had a session on unions organizing internationally against the far right. Salvatore was also present there as one of the speakers. We had also comrades from ABVV from Belgium. This year we will hold another festival on the 21st of September, and the international trade union fight against the far right is one of the topics again. So I hope we can maybe co-organize it in the context of this network. I will pass the information on to the comrades from Sugil to put it on the agenda of the manifesto of the network. Just to second the idea of the exchange of union strategies, how can we strengthen each other? Maybe we can also open a space on the website to actually do that, where we can store information. I'm also part of, on behalf of FNV, of an ETY exchange on, that's more from our training department, what kind of training materials are being developed by different trade unions in Europe. Possibly many of you are also participating there, but there's a closed space where we can share that type of information. Maybe on an international level, I think it would be really valuable to have this as well. So maybe we can add this to the website just as a very concrete suggestion. And yeah, based on what I heard today, I'm really interested to hear more about the digital strategies being used in the context of Brazil, and indeed what was mentioned about the educational material developed in the US to have the conversations with actual workers on the far right and how to win them back. So that's it as far as my contribution is concerned.
Gracias, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Now I think Kathy is back with us, so I can give the floor to our four speakers so that they may give us one last short contribution before we conclude this important webinar that is really helping us a lot. And I believe the upcoming ones will also be useful, because this exchange that we're holding amongst ourselves is important. It makes us stronger through solidarity, but not only through solidarity. Sharing our strategies is also important. I'm going to give the floor to Ivan. Yes, thank you once again, Nicoleta, and all of the comrades, Kathy, Lisboa, and Rodrigo, and all the rest that are taking part, Cristina, and everyone else. What we acknowledge as a value is that this is what we're doing. This is what we need to do. To acknowledge this is important. Now, the next one will be on Europe, because we must have a thread joining us all concerning the behavior of the far right, knowing that it's the same thing throughout the world on an international level. And we need to react in a coordinated manner on the international level as well. Information is always useful and necessary, although the way things happen are minute by minute in the case of Argentina. And that is a part of the agenda. It is a part of their plan to keep us distracted with things that pull our attention away from our focus, which in the case of trade unions, and that is the specificity of trade unions, is strictly connected with the needs of our workers, with the concrete reality, with their rights or the lack of them. And when they pull us out of focus by placing what they call the cultural war against us, then we feel sometimes lost. And several people have already mentioned that we need to carry this vision of this battle from the vision of classes. In Brazil, we see an expression of this, of the moral and values of the Christian society, and so on and so forth. And that is a part of the concrete everyday life of people, of workers. So not only do we have the task of acknowledging concretely the struggle for the rights of our workers, we have that agenda that we cannot leave aside, we cannot neglect, because it all started by attacking workers when they deny their rights, transforming workers into entrepreneurs, into collaborators, saying that the individual expression is something that does not go through trade unions, nor parties, nor the state. So, as Milei says, the state is the main enemy. He says it clearly. We don't need to improve it or make it better. We need to put an end to it. And people feel that the state is not responding to their needs. And trade unions are trying to mediate between acknowledged, recognized rights and the absence of those rights through manipulation. So we also have a training task, a task in terms of training. We need to do this. We did this in Montevideo, taking advantage of the meeting of the council. So it was an act of solidarity with Argentina so that they could also have a stage where they could place their issues with the solidarity of the rest of the international trade union movement. In Europe, many actions and events were carried out because part of the strategy is to put our own condition into doubt. People were even doubting that Lula's innocent. They said that it was true that Lula had, I don't know what, that he was guilty, and they tried to convince our parceiros that was at stake was not only Lula's freedom, but Brazil's democracy. So that is the point, not the parties. It's democracy, because the strategy tries to destroy democracy. And there is something that we have done from TUCA, and it is something we cannot do alone. We need allies in the different social movements. In the case of Latin America, it is very clear, and we need to act with priority, and that is our challenge for the near future. TUCA from Iguazu about a month ago. We established that democracy and regional integration has to be a concrete regional agenda that joins us. We cannot let things like what happened in Ecuador happen or go by. If you don't know it, the government of Ecuador invaded the Mexican embassy to imprison a man that was under political asylum because the far right does not respect nor recognize national or international institutions. If we let what happened in Ecuador with the Mexican embassy, it's going to happen all over the world. So the immediate reaction of the governments of the Americas and partly in Europe is important, because if they have nobody to oppose what they're doing, they're going to continue. It is what happening with the Gaza Strip and with the Security Council that is no longer respected. So this is important. We need to act with strength. If they imprison a social leader, a trade unionist, the leader of a party that we are aware of, we need to react with solidarity. And to conclude, there is a task that has to do with what Hernan suggested, the essence of workers nowadays. There is an attack of violence towards migrant workers in all of our countries. And this is a part of the historical agenda of trade unions to defend workers, whatever their condition or nationality. And this is a specific task we need to carry out. And there is an urgency before the environmental crisis, the climate crisis, the effects that these crises are having on our populations. We need to find answers besides the Conference of the Parties and the international debate. There is a part that the trade unions need to deal with concerning the transition and linking up democracy with the people. TUCA produces important information all the time. We're going to try to share our publications with the network, the videos that Andres mentioned. We're going to send them to the network so that they may be distributed. Thank you, Nicoleta. Thank you, CGIL. Forza for tomorrow, for what you're going to do tomorrow. Thank you, Ivan. The strength, the forza of all of you will surely help us. Antonio, Kathy, and Rodrigo, we have less than 10 minutes, unfortunately. Thank you, Nicoleta. I wanted to go back to something Kathy mentioned, and that is the fake news situation with the use of artificial intelligence. In my opinion, this is an extremely serious problem, but we have another very serious problem, and that is the lack of ability to regulate these new technologies. And on top of that issue of the freedom, in inverted commas, that the far right is moving forward with, well, they are trying to extract a narrative from us. They consider that freedom is now lies. It's coming up with fake news. They call it freedom now, having state coups in small countries, defending, as it is done in the social networks of Brazil, for example, Hitler's positions. So that is the freedom that the far right is promoting and defending now. So how can we regulate all this? There is a situation we need to insist on the national governments with and multilateral organizations, because if the United States, that is the most powerful country in the world, is suffering this situation. Imagine what could happen in Bolivia or Paraguay or Brazil or other countries. So this is a huge challenge for all of us. We need to think about this, and we need to create the conditions and the policies that can lead us to a situation that allows us to tackle this problem. Secondly, Ivan mentioned the support to Argentina. I think it is very important for us from outside of Argentina to keep doing as we did during Brazil's worst crisis, that is, to keep upholding an agenda of support to Argentina before the local press, for example. Twice I was in Washington to address Parliament, members of Parliament of the American Congress, showing letters that strengthened our position here in Brazil, the Italian press, for example. That is a process that we need to keep up to support the struggle of our comrades in Argentina. Another issue that I think should be mentioned in our next webinar with Nicoleta, Salvatore, and the rest of the women and men comrades, the issue for me, forgive me for insisting upon this, but for me, the issue is quite clear. Defending democracy needs to be accomplished with the defense of social rights and the rights of workers. If we don't put on the table the issue of how our workers are being exploited, how companies are being privatized, the lack of rights and social rights for workers, all of this is a huge highway towards the success of the far right. And their liberalistic policies are moving forward through this space of lack of social rights. So the fight for democracy needs to be coordinated with our reflections on social rights and the rights of workers. We are experiencing a crisis, which is the humanitarian crisis, the most serious one we've ever experienced, which is in the Gaza Strip and Palestine. Brazil has very good relations with Israel, but now Netanyahu is going beyond everything we've known. It is not a war, it is genocide, because until last week, they even stopped humanitarian aid from reaching the people and children going hungry because of this. And Netanyahu is far right. So we're not criticizing or condemning the people of Israel. But we do need to place Netanyahu between those in the far right, like Bolsonaro, Trump, and the guy in Portugal. So I don't want to lead my life as someone who has done nothing to put an end to the genocide. I want to say it even before the ILO of what is happening in Palestine and the Gaza Strip. Thank you, Antonio. We are also organizing aid for the Gaza Strip as CGIL. And so we share your worries and concerns. And Rodrigo, one last short intervention, and then we shall draw our conclusions. Thank you, Nicoleta. Yes, I will be very brief. I think the analysis has shown us very clearly what the situation is in our countries and on the international level. We need to start working and putting into practice all of our plans. We need to go back to the basis, also in terms of training. We need to work face to face with each of our members. That is the easiest and the main step for trade unions to be able to occupy that space of real representation they need to have.
Teniendo hoy en día a través de las redes sociales y las fake news. Así que, bueno, nada, simplemente agradecer y esperar que haya mucho más espacios como estos y se pueda replicar. Y después, bueno, darle la continuidad de que si podemos colgar esta conversación en las redes sociales, también sería un gran avance para que los compañeros que no pudieron estar hoy presentes lo puedan escuchar en otro momento. Y volver a agradecerles a todos por la paciencia y la solidaridad internacional.
Bueno, gracias. Lamentablemente, Katy tuvo que desconectarse porque tenía otra reunión. Seguro que van a
Thank you.
encontrar.
Kathy has left us because she had another meeting, but you will find this webinar in the YouTube channel of Colectiva. It is recorded both in English and Spanish, so you can follow it whenever you like. We're going to send you a link. It is very important. We also believe that our debate has been extremely important. I thank you for your contributions, especially our speakers, but all the comrades who have followed and made a contribution. I also thank our interpreters. The speaker says very kindly, we thank you as well. And we have a date for our next webinar, which will be held very soon, and it will be about Europe. So it's an important date, it's an important event, because we have huge challenges with European elections. As Salvatore said, here in Italy, we are also facing a far-right government. So, comrades, what can I say? International solidarity is hugely important. The network has to be a place where we can hold our dialogues and share our strategies. And as we were saying at the beginning of the meeting, we cannot fight only on the national level. We need to have an international strategy because because the far right has an international strategy as well. And so let us keep up our international battle, our cultural battle, our battle on the social networks, and see you at the next webinar. Thank you and hope to see you soon.
Buenas tardes.
Abrazos a todos.
Chao, chao.
Chao, Giuseppe. Ah, se fue.
Ciao. Grazie, grazie. Gracias a todos. Ciao.
Grazie agli interpreti. Maurizio, io posso staccare, giusto? Davide, non so se ci siete, stacco.
Grazie a voi. Buon pomeriggio allora.